Good morning. So I decided to make a TV stand for my game consoles. I am not really much of a woodworker myself. I had a high school class, but I haven't touched it in years. So this is the first big project I've done since high school. And essentially, I just want to get into furniture making. So this is the first project I've really tried to take seriously. With that being said, this is a lot of me figuring stuff out. This is not a guide of any sort. I am not being safe. I'm sure I've violated safety rules somewhere along this line, and I'm definitely not experienced enough for you to take this as a guide. So this is just me recording my experience and explaining it to the best of my ability. So here, to start with, I'm making the sides of my TV stand. In this machine, the side that goes on the bottom becomes perfectly flat, and then you put that flat side against the fence there, and then the edge becomes perfectly flat, or 90 degrees from the flat face. Here I am cutting all of these side pieces to width. And here I'm using a planer, and what this does is makes the top side perfectly parallel to the bottom side. And I had made the bottom flat with that earlier machine called a joiner. And this also gets it down to a consistent thickness for all of these boards. And here I am trimming up the boards for the side, trying to get them all to be exactly the same length. And here I am water popping the wood. I don't know exactly why this works, but I was taught to spray water on all of these boards so that in the future, if water does get on them, they don't deform, I think is the idea. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it's what I was taught in my class. And here I am joining the sides with the legs of the TV stand using dowels. And there I have a self-centering dowel jig. I am very inexperienced with these, and I wasn't able to line them up perfectly this time. It's one of the biggest regrets I have regarding this project. But hey, it's a learning experience. It's the first big project I've done in a very long time. So cut myself a bit of slack, but I'm definitely not using everything perfectly as intended here. And here I am cutting a slit through the top of each of the side panels, or for the very top of the side panels. And what that does is it gives me a place to mount these clips called Z-clips. You'll see it right here. And what that does is just clamps down the sides to the top of the project you're working on. And you'll see me mount those later. And here I'm using a router to round over the top and bottom of each of these side pieces. It makes it look better, but it also makes it so if you bump it or something like that, it won't splinter or like crack. It's more resistant to that. here I am assembling the side pieces and the legs. And I did also route the legs, I just didn't capture that on camera. And on top of the dowels, I am also using wood glue to give it the main strength. The dowels are mainly for alignment, which is ironic because I couldn't use them to align anything. But that's the idea. And then I am clamping the pieces together just so everything is fit tightly. And the same thing for the other side. And here now I am working on the base of the TV stand. And so this is the bottom shelf that will hold up all of the consoles, everything like that. And I did use these wooden boards to try to have everything be even. And they did work for that, but unfortunately I didn't cover them in tape or anything. I don't know why I didn't think of this, but that wood glue that I put in between them also stuck to that wooden piece that was supporting it. So unfortunately I had to get pretty friendly with a mallet to get them off. And here is those pictures of the gouge that happened because of those boards. Luckily, I was able to sand that all out later. And here I'm doing the final glue up for that bottom panel. And I'm sanding down everything to make sure that it glues together as perfectly as I can get it. And here I am trimming the sides of them so that it is perfectly straight. And I was able to sand everything out like I mentioned earlier, and it did take quite a while. There is a lot of footage of sanding, so I will be cutting out quite a lot of it. If you're interested in the 20-hour cut of me sanding, let me know. I got plenty. And here I am water popping that baseboard as well. And then I was visited by my companion here. This is Pumpkin. Now I started to work on the back of the TV stand. Again, going through that joiner. Apologies for blocking the camera. And there was a whole lot of sawdust here, and I realized something.
Well, I know why it wasn't vacuuming very well, so that's cool.
Now that everything was cleaned up, I went back to joining. And here is the glue up for that back panel. Again, just trying to get everything assembled in the way that leaves the least cracks in the middle. And here I am adding the same Z-clip slot to the top of that back panel, so I can mount the very top of the TV stand. Now I started working on the top itself. one of the reasons I mentioned that I'm not being super safe earlier is because I wasn't wearing a breathing, I don't know what you call it, breathing protection, a respirator to protect me from the fine sawdust and all that. I am using it here. I'm not familiar enough with what uses it's required for. So I may have used it when it wasn't necessary and vice versa. And here I am working on the apron piece, and that is just a small piece that will help me mount the top when I need to. Additionally, I'm adding a shelf to the middle of the TV stand, and that's what these boards are going to be used for. Here I start working on the supports for the TV stand, and these will go underneath the project just to help hold up the weight. It will also be mounted on the sides, but I just want to give it as much support as I can. I'm going to be filling this TV stand with a bunch of consoles, which are very expensive and decently heavy, so I just want to be extra careful and it can't hurt anything. And I'm also working on the legs for the shelf itself that will prop it up. And to make sure that the supports are the right size, I had to glue these 3 boards together and then cut them to the correct height. And here I am rounding over the bottom of these supports just to hopefully prevent the TV stand from scratching the floor and also to prevent any sort of chipping or anything like that. And this is the first layer of stain I put on all of these pieces, and unfortunately this became kind of useless because I started using a product called wood grain filler after this, which I should have done before. And what that product does is it fills in the gaps of the wood, just because this particular wood, it's red oak and it has open grain wood. I'm not going to act like I know exactly what that all means, but you need to use this pour grain filler for it to be smooth. And I knew I had to use it, but I didn't realize I had to do it before I stained. So what I ended up doing was staining everything, putting wood grain filler on it, and then having to sand that down. And then at that point, it's looking very close to its original color anyway, so I restained it. here I'm using a metal card to apply that wood grain filler. Unfortunately, that was a big mistake because that metal card scratched up everything. It's really why don't follow this as an example. This is just me trying things out. But luckily, a lot of those scratches I got out with a sander after the fact.
In the shadow of the valley, I would like to settle down. Wide open space, wind on my face, a distant horizon, the moon on the crest. In the shadow of the valley that I love best, you have always waited for me, and you always will be there. Sagebrush and pine, old friends of mine. A little bit further, I will find my rest in the shadow of the valley that I love best. Wandered many places, but they're all the same to me. Nowhere I found to settle down. A little bit further, I'll find my rest in the shadow of the valley that I love best. In the shadow of the valley that I love best.
here is the final layer of stain that actually ended up on the final product. And something I had trouble with when I was staining this project is that the ends of the board can get kind of uneven. Where it drips down, it's really hard to cover that up, and it might be something where I just waited too long and it partially dried, something like that. But even after I stained over it, there's still these remnants of drips and all that, so it just wasn't super even towards the ends. I think using a cotton rag would be much better for getting a more even coat, and also just spending extra time on those edges. And I finally got to the assembly process, and the first thing I did was mount these L brackets onto each side of the TV stand, and these will be partially what holds up the base of the TV stand. There will also be those supports that I mentioned earlier. And this is where the alignment was a really big issue. So when I went to drill holes for the dowels to mount the back piece, I realized that my dowel jig can't get over this leg because it's already mounted into the full side. So I ended up having to freehand it. And what I'm doing here is trying to line up a perfect dot in the middle so I can, as accurately as I can, get that dowel hole drilled. And I ended up using just a brad point bit with a stop collar on it, which is absolutely not how you're supposed to do that. And throughout this entire project, I had a lot of trouble with these pipe clamps. And they're so simple, I have no idea why I couldn't figure them out, but the end of them kept moving. So not the side with the handle, but the side that's just supposed to stay in place. that just kept moving back and forth. I could never completely figure it out. It's probably really simple and I just don't know, but it made me feel like such a moron for not being able to figure it out. Luckily, I didn't get too mad here, but I definitely did in the future.
I assembled something. It's been like... It's been a long time. Like 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
And after 3-4 weeks of work, it was so nice to have something that even kind of resembled a piece of furniture. I mean, it's one thing when it's just boards you've been working on, but actually having it be a product in front of you was really rewarding. Even if that product is misaligned to And here I am lining up the apron piece. I did use pocket holes to screw this in. I did not record that portion just because of how heated I got regarding this part of the project. I was completely unable to get this clamp to stay down, and because of that, I ended up getting pretty pissed, as you'll see here.
Look, it doesn't do anything. Who could have ever wondered?
Anyway, I just cut to when I had it figured out, because I didn't feel like recording in that exact moment. And here I start mounting the bottom panel to the sides. And there we have it. That actually looks like a thing. It's crazy. Now I am mounting the bottom supports that will help support the weight, and I'm sure these wouldn't be perfectly necessary, but I just wanted them there just in case. Nothing wrong with a little overkill. And I did use glue in addition to the brackets I used here. I just give it some extra strength. Here I am mounting the legs to the shelf, again using brackets. And surprisingly, it actually was relatively even. Like I mentioned earlier, I've had a lot of trouble getting the dowels to align perfectly, so there's plenty of reasons why this should not be even, but I was very surprised to see that it was even close to level. And here I am screwing in the bottom of the support legs to the shelf. And in classic fashion, I did end up breaking a screw. We had to pull out the pliers, whole lot of fun. There's a reason this footage is at 20 times speed. And here I'm just polishing up the apron piece. It was pretty rough, so I had to sand it down, and I ended up restaining it. And here I'm applying a water-based satin finish. It turned out very well, and it feels like I'm not going to damage the wood or anything once it was dried. And there is 3 coats of this, I just didn't include the other 2 for the sake of brevity. And here I am starting to mount the top to the base of the project. And I am now installing those Z-clips that I had mentioned earlier. I don't know if there's an exact recommended amount of them. I ended up putting in, I think, close to 25 or something. Way more than you probably should use. Reason number 80, don't use this as a guide. And because I am using this to house a bunch of consoles, I do have to drill holes for the cords that will go into all of those, which scared the crap out of me because of how long it's taken me to get to this point. And I did get these rubber hole covers to make it look a bit nicer and let those cords through. there it is. That is the final product. Now all I have to do is install it in my room. And I did end up having to drill 2 extra holes on the top of the shelf just because I didn't remember that I was going to be putting consoles there. That about does it. I hope you enjoyed this build. Please do not try to replicate anything you saw in this video. If you have any sort of advice or opinions, anything like that, let me know. I'd be very interested to see what I did wrong, what I did right, anything like that. Have a good one.